My name is Miriam Haas. I adapted my middle name. My middle name is my maiden name, which I use as my middle name because I wanted to keep the name alive, of my family alive.
And where were you born?
I was born in Oświęcim, which is the Polish name for the infamous Auschwitz, the well-known concentration camp.
And when were you born?
I
What
was
year?
born in 1922 on September 30th.
Would you like to show us on here where you were born?
This is the map of Oświęcim, done by one of the survivors who edited the book about Oświęcim in Israel. And this is where I was born. And this is the area, all the streets are named in Polish, but the area where the concentration camp is marked in Hebrew. Machane Rikuz, I have to look with my glasses. Machane Rikuz, which means concentration camp. This was the area, and this was the general concentration camp. And here is the word Brzezinka, where the Jewish inmates were kept. This was a suburb of Oświęcim. Now here is the infamous railroad. And
thank you. Tell us something about your family before the war, your family life.
All right. I was born to a Hasidic family and lived in Oświęcim until I was in about third or fourth grade. My father had a business in a city in Silesia. By the way, this was the southwest corner of Poland. And my father had to commute to his store and decided that it was too far it took hours away of his day, too far and too difficult. So he chose a city which was a good community to raise nice Jewish religious children. He didn't move directly to the city where the business was, but somewhere in the middle, and that was a much larger city. I must say a word about Oświęcim yet. This was a small city of about 12,000 population, of which about 50% were Jewish. And I thought that until I read more about it, that it was all Hasidic, not all, but predominantly Hasidic, because this was my environment when I was so young, but I learned later there were all kinds of Zionist organizations of all shades, from left to right, and religious Zionists too, I'm sure. In fact, my youngest male uncle, my mother's brother, started as a Zionist. I must mention his name because he had a very tragic, ironic fate. He started as a Zionist and went to Palestine and was very disenchanted because they were persecuted by the British and by the Arabs and sought refuge at some Jewish land. There were a few landowners, and he got very disenchanted, was very idealistic, and became a communist. And the British authorities sent him back to Poland, and on the way he cut his wrist, and this was an abomination for my grandfather at Tremé. He couldn't forgive him that. And this was a very intelligent, idealistic young man, and eventually he renounced communism, and when during the war was imprisoned by the Russians, someone denounced him, and I thought that he ended his life in Russia in a prison. But actually, I was told later, which was even more heartbreaking, that he was very sick and his friends were going to Palestine after the war, or close to the end of the war, and he begged them, take me with you. So he became a Zionist again and wanted to go back, and no one dared to take him in his condition, and he proudly finished. So this was my Uncle Cyrillik.
Well, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had two sisters and one brother. We were 4 children, and the youngest and the oldest didn't survive. And
what were their names?
Balcha, her official name was Berta, the youngest. And my oldest brother's was Yehuda Zev. We all had Hebrew names, and I might add as an interesting thing that in Poland the Jews had someone who kept for the Polish government did the population registration, the birth registration. So this was a Hebraist, and he urged my father to this. I heard the story later, of course, to give the children Hebrew names. So my brother was Yehuda Zev, I was Miriam, and my sister was Leah. But my youngest sister got the Bertha official name, which I probably that person that was so anxious about Hebrew names probably was old and passed away, because this is how I remember the story. So,
and what kind of a life did you have with your family before the war started? What did you go to school?
Yes, in Oświęcim, I went to a general school, which means with Gentile children, and I don't like to harp on the anti-Semitism, but I must say that I had Polish and Jewish friends. My closest friends were Jewish, but I remember I was thinking of one girl whom I befriended, who was in a Jewish in an orphanage run by nuns, and I was an excellent student. I wasn't good in art, and she was helping me with art, but she told me that the nuns told her not to associate with me. But we still were good friends. I didn't somehow, but she told me that. And when I was in about 3rd or 4th grade, I can't tell exactly, we moved to Sosnowiec, which was a much larger city, with about 120 to 140,000 population. It was as big as when we moved to Anaheim, which was in 1957. So, and there may have been about half of the population Jewish, and maybe less. And this was like a young city, which is similar to people came from all over. No one was from, so they were born in outlying areas in small cities. And it was much more impersonal, but I liked it, and I always wanted to be considered that I come from Sosnowiec. But my roots were in Oświęcim, and I must have loved that little city because my aunts and uncles lived there, and my beloved cousins, the younger and my age, and whenever my dad went to visit, I had to go. And once they even teased me once and said, I came home, where is Dad? Oh, he went to Oświęcim. Without me, I was outraged. And then I went to, in Sosnowiec, they had like a segregated school for Jewish children, the elementary schools, which were very good. And they were they were public schools, but only for Jewish children. So we were second, we were a minority, a recognized minority that had rights, but not the full rights that the Polish citizens have. This is what the status was, and there was an expression, minority rights, that's what it was. But anyway, it didn't hurt us. We got a very good education. We had mostly Jewish teachers. I wouldn't vouch for it in that school because I just can't place each one, and I don't remember each one really. And my dad was religiously conducted himself as a Chassid, but he had a business, and he also didn't believe that the exterior is so important. He was dressed in a modest, modern way, didn't follow and maybe some pictures will attest to it. And he was very much for education of the children. But I also went to a Jewish afternoon school in Beit Yaakov, it was called. That was a school. Some of you are familiar with it, for religious girls. And there I learned Yiddish and Hebrew translation of the prayers. And some of them I know to this day. But my dad never urged the girls to pray too much. He went to this. We just learned things by osmosis. We weren't preached to at all, and we knew what was right and what was wrong. Everyone to our personality. I was, my sister, the one who survived, was more impulsive, and I was more deliberate, subdued, but and more sensitive, and I knew. But we conducted ourselves accordingly. In fact, once when I went by, just in my period where I was sort of free thinking, I went on Shabbat to, I confess publicly my sin, I went to a larger city because by streetcar, I felt not so much guilty that I went, but if I didn't want to hurt my parents. I thought if someone sees me, the daughter of Yonah Posner went, it would be just devastating, and I never did it again. But I was considered the sort of a rebel. I don't like this expression because some people are so proud of it, but when I argued with my brother, he used to say, my grandpa said, the Grandpa Posner, my father's father, that you ruined all the children in the family. And he meant religiously, and I don't know, I had some influence on my cousins, but I was just freer, and they felt it, and but I always remained deeply religious, even though I didn't follow the ritual.
What did the atmosphere in your area start to change?
Well, it never actually, it was always anti-Semitic. And we lived with the Gentiles. We had servants, and I'm not bragging that we were rich, but every middle-class family had the household was such a complicated thing, because everything has to be done by hand, most of it anyway, that my mother couldn't handle it, and no mother. If the middle-class families, the girls, for the country girls were hired to do, and they stayed with the family. And our last apartment, she had her own room. Otherwise, they slept in the kitchen, and they helped with the work. And they were very anti-Semitic. They were treated so well. They all wanted to go to Jewish families. Gentile families had servants too. But especially I remember moments in my parents making comments when she comes from that church. She is so difficult, and she's so she's really difficult to handle. And this was the church. And I make it publicly, the Catholic Church.
It was
Europe,
the Catholic Church.
Yes, Europe was where I have an affinity. I'm not saying it because right now I don't associate, but with my Catholic friends. But I had a few friends when I studied in college here in California that they were Catholics. For some reason, we always gravitated to each other. And but I must make the statement that I lived through. The church was enticing the people to anti-Semitism, against the Jews, anti-Semitism. And so in spite of all this, and this is an important point that I think an important point, Jews persisted and lived and developed a very rich culture and lived in Poland for centuries, and that shouldn't be forgotten. And somehow these two populations lived and to a certain extent prospered together, and the Jews certainly developed a rich cultural life in every respect, of all the branches and shades of Judaism and religiousness and political political persuasions. And I was at a very young age, I read my dad's newspapers. I mostly in Polish, but he had Yiddish and Polish newspapers, probably some German, because the area where his business was already that disputed territory that people spoke maybe more German than Polish, but belonged to Poland. And he was educated educated himself probably in German. He wrote German classics. He read German classics and tried to get me interested too, because he was worried about me reading things that were not appropriate for me. So I digressed, and I wanted to mention something important, but I digressed, and now I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Speaking about...
you wanted to tell me about a poem?
No. Speaking about anti-Semitism, yes, you want to ask me how things changed.
Yes.
Well, the big change came already at close, let's say, a year before the war. There was just a fear. Also, fear that there's going to be a war. And especially, also, I wanted to mention in about 1938, I may be a year off. Hitler threw out the Polish citizens from Germany. They were considered Fremde, strange foreigners. They were left on the border of Poland and no man's land, and Poland didn't want to accept them, and Germany. This was a very terrible situation. And after a while, they came to Poland, and this was also a foreboding of things to come, and they were helped out as much as possible and absorbed, and my dad helped to make a living. In one case, really, it was a distant relative, the wife was a distant, it was an old man, and my dad gave him merchandise, and he was to peddle. Jews did a lot of peddling everywhere, and in Poland especially, from his store, and I knew that that man would, just to keep his dignity. I don't know if he made a living, but that he was doing something. And I was just amazed, because my dad was just coming up in life, the store was developing, but he wasn't a rich man. But just to keep the man's dignity, so he helped people out like that. And so this was one period, and then just the summer before the war, I came back from some summer vacation. I took with my younger sister, because my dad didn't want to go anywhere, so my mother, he couldn't. No, wait a minute. The way we used to go on vacations was that my dad, when we lived in the small town, my dad ate with the family, with his sisters and brothers, and we went to Rabka, to the children's resort, where my grandfather was a shochet, a ritual slaughterer, and at the same time he was a rabbi for this community. So those were beautiful summers we spent, and in that way my life was quite happy and secure. Also, my dad was always worried about the livelihood. That Silesia with the mixed German-Polish population didn't seem very secure to him. But we had everything we needed and good schools. Never money was always available for schools, and fancy uniforms. Schools had uniforms, and at home when Shabbat came, we were kings, and it was beautiful and secure. But outside, it wasn't always so. And my brother, when we moved to Sosnowiec, to the big city, we lived first on the outskirts. There weren't so many people. So once my brother, some day boys threw stones at him. He was very stubborn. He was wearing his Jewish cap the way he liked it. He didn't want to wear the school cap. And he was very religious. And also, I think this was his reaction to anti-Semitism. So they threw stones at him. And my mother was a very sociable person and spoke beautiful Polish, because you could recognize Jews, even the most educated, by some pronunciation defect. There were all kinds of theories about it, that the throats were, or the tongues were used to go a certain way when they were small and spoke Yiddish, which I did too until the age of 5. So
it sounds like you had a very happy life there.
So my mother went to the policeman and to the father of the one boy who threw the stones and told him she didn't understand. She knew they were anti-Semites, but a policeman is a policeman. He's supposed to keep order, and his son threw a stone. So he told her, "What do you want? He didn't kill him yet." This is one of my memories. And also, it was mixed like that.
What happened when the war broke out? How did your life change, and what happened then? Well, may I say something else? I don't want, there was, in Oświęcim, I don't remember if there was poverty, there was some, but Sosnowiec was already a big city. So there was poverty too, but I have read about Jewish life in other big cities, especially in Vilna by Lucy Davidovich, which describes such grinding poverty and such hopelessness that I haven't seen in Sosnowiec. But there was poverty. And Sosnowiec was also a city of big industry, business, and all kinds of trades. A real Jewish city. The people weren't all religious. They were workers, and Bund was active. Bund was a secular Jewish organization that Yiddishists who socialists and unbelievers were. And but then when the war broke out, what happened?
When the war broke out, the Sosnowiec was so close to the German border that they were. On September 1st, when I went out, well, my dad left. Excuse me, it was known that the Germans, when they came into a city, they killed the man. And we were very worried about our father. And my dad was also worried about the parnassah, the livelihood. He said his business, the Silesia, that part of Poland, will not be accessible to Jews anymore. He gave up. So and since we urged him to leave, and he was already thinking of caring for his family, he said, I will just go to Kielce, which was a big city about a little bit up northeast, and I will establish myself there, and you will come. I mean, no one could foresee this type of a blitzkrieg and that type of upheaval. So he left a few days ago, and on the 1st of September, before the 1st of September, and on the 1st of September, my sister and I went to contact the people who may have known where they landed and where they were, and on the way there, a few motorcycles of Germans, uniformed Germans, came into the city and started shooting. We saw blood on the streets, and we ran home, and that was the beginning. So the people we were supposed to be urged by what was left of the Polish government to go down to the cellars. There were sort of temporary shelters from the whatever bombs they were, and this is where we all gathered until we were able, when we came out,
the Germans were in. We came out of the shelters. I mean.
How long did you stay in the shelter?
I couldn't say truthful for sure. Probably overnight or something like that. And they were in, and we learned that they did get in. They knocked at the gates of the. Well, most of the people lived in apartment buildings, some better, some worse. And they knocked at the gates of the building, and the first one, I remember one boy who opened, that was a friend, was killed on the spot, and that's the way they were what they were doing, just killing indiscriminately.
And then what happened to your family?
And we were left in, my mother with the 4 children, and helpless, because my mother always depended on my dad for a living. But I must say, a few days before the war, my dad brought half of the merch. He had a fabric store, and it was pretty large. So to show loyalty to the Polish government, he kept half of the merchandise left in the store, and half he brought home. So we thought we would be selling this and live from it. But someone denounced us, and the Germans took away all of it, practically all. So my mother, again, she just thought she talked to people, so she asked the German who was, when he was leaving, he says, "Now what shall I do now? I am a woman with 4 children." So he said to her, "Take a rope and hang yourself." And my mother she was this type of, she said she went out, and of course she was appalled at first, and then she went out and bought whatever she could. She bought us something good to eat. This was the type, was her reaction.
Did you stay in that town?
We stayed in that apartment until they threw us out. So we kept, in the meantime, a black market developed, and many people did manage to, of course, in the beginning there was no bread, nothing, but my dad already provided, because he bought 2 big, 100 kilo of bags of flour, so in the beginning we didn't have to stand in line for bread, and there was very little. But then potatoes were the big item, because bread wasn't available, and potatoes were supposed to be cheap in Poland. But I couldn't go, so my sister this sister who survived, I looked very Jewish. They could point me out, among the Poles especially, and even among the, so we sent my sister, and she was successful a few times, but at one point they just threw her out. They said, "You are Jewish," because she went to any store like everyone else to get something. "You are Jewish," and so she didn't go anymore. But we tried, in all this, they took everything away from, all the merchandise away from us, but all that my dad brought home. But a little bit that they left, they forgot. There's always things like that happen. So we were selling this. My mother and my brother mostly went out, and I was behind, always saying he shouldn't sell it so cheap. I was so concerned about the family. I was next to the oldest, and we lived on that we were absolutely incapable. My mother was very sociable and went out every day in the street to talk to people, to see what's going on, but we were no one. There were kids 9 years old who were on the black market and were doing well, from the poorest families, and I rejoiced. Even then I rejoiced that they were able to do it, because I knew them, I saw that misery before, and there were other people from all kinds of stages in life that managed in the first, let's say, the first year of the war, to make a living on the black market. This was the only way, otherwise it was impossible to survive. And the rest lived in misery, or just like selling out the way we were doing. And also, my dad left us the book, because he sold an installment, and he was a very honest, I really was, and also considerate of his. I was very proud of that. I remember that he told my mother, oh, this one is a decent man. I'm going to give him a chance and wait until he gets another job or improves his situation. But sometimes he said, this is a lousy man. I'm lazy. He used a fowler or something. And I have to take him to court. I just must. So anyway, he left us the book with the debts that they owed. That was a lot of fortune. It was already a developed business. And I wrote the letters my mother signed. We devised to write to the people in that area where the business was, those that we had the addresses, to send them money. And my mother wrote that she's alone with 4 children. We couldn't threaten them with anything. We had no rights. And they were, whatever, some of them were called Germans by nationality. It was a new concept that developed that with the Germans in, they got, and some, whatever they had more rights than we had. So we just, in a very polite way, I wrote the letters in my mother's name that I always like to write, that they should please, they owe us money, and my mother alone needs the money, and they should please send some. And we got quite a bit, and from that, and among those people, I must mention that too, one woman wrote that I'm 90 years old, I may be off, maybe she was 80, I can't believe that at that time a woman, such a poor woman, lived so long, and I support myself by washing clothes for people, but I'm going to send this because Mr. Posner deserves it. So those are my memories.
So how long did you all stay together?
So we stayed together until all completely together. From the beginning, they were tearing us apart because my brother was taken to a work camp, and this was the only son and the oldest brother, and my mother was just devastated. We all were, but my mother went out in the street and looked for connections, and she got him back. She paid some money and got him back. So we were back again together. This took some months. So I remember it, but I can't give the exact time. And then, so we were together again. Then in 1942, well, at first we learned that we learned that I must say something about the fate of my father because it has to do with the history of the period. So my father landed in Lemberg, which is Lvov, which was a Polish city in the years between the First and Second World War, but it was, at the time my father landed, it was under Russia, the communists. So at a certain, and we got mail now and then, and we knew where he was, and he tried to get along as best as he could, and he wrote to my mother, he already knew that she should try to get the 2 oldest children, that's my brother and me, to America, because we had relatives there. And I have that envelope that shows so my mother, influenced by that, wrote to relatives in America to get us, to bring us here. So at a certain point, the Russian government allowed the people from different areas of Poland to register for return to their homeland. So my dad didn't register because he thought that it would be construed as a disloyalty or antagonism to the communist government, and they would jail them. So he didn't register and stayed. And it's sure enough, they took all those people who registered for return to their homes to Siberia. And the communists, the Russians. But some of them, they suffered and they died. Many of them died, and I think one of my maternal uncles, but some of them survived the typhus and the misery but then the Germans came to this area of Poland when in 1941, I may be off with dates here,
the Germans broke the pact with Russia and came into occupied Lemberg and did with the Jews what they did everywhere else. They took them to the camps in that destruction camps in the extermination. I don't know. I shouldn't use the word destruction camps in that area. I not want to use the word extermination because this is the word that Hitler used and it's just the meaning a little more than.
Did you know what camp he was taken to?
I think Ostrov or Ostrovo, and I still dream of getting there someday if God gives me life and energy and everything else I need for that. So, because I think, anyway, so we even, for the first time in my life, we got a postcard from my dad asking for help. My dad always tried to help others and do the best he could, and he wrote, please send me a package. And it was the letter, a postcard. This was from the camp. He was taken to that camp, and and I could see from there, my dad had a beautiful handwriting and wrote the applications to the government for friends and acquaintances, and for the first time his writing was sloppy, and I knew that it's very bad. So we had some relatives in the Lvov, that area, and for some way we asked them to send a package, and then came the news that the package came back. And my uncle, the one who is on the photograph here as a young man, took with me out because I was, for some reason he thought maybe I will somehow accept it. I was next to the oldest and tried to talk to me and make me understand that my dad is not alive anymore, but I didn't accept it. I just listened, and so he...
and what happened to your mother and
so I remember that he said, you put the finger in their mouth and they don't, he must have talked to my mother too before, and that's why, and then he came to talk to me, and he put the finger in their mouth and they don't want to know. But after the war, I found out from the one cousin who survived, it was very close to this paternal side of my family, that they knew that he was, they've killed him there. So then came 1942. Are we running short on time?
You're fine.
Okay. Then came 1942. Okay, so first they threw us out from that. So one day I just came home from somewhere. We were allowed to walk certain streets, and we had to walk like the way the cars go, the traffic. One way only on one side of the street. Well, we all had wore the Magen David, the yellow Magen David, and we were limited with by all kinds of things. And one day, we still were walking around, and we were not in a ghetto yet. So one day I came home, and some things were being thrown out through the window. Then we were asked to leave the apartment, just like that. And the boys, my grandfathers. Oh, in the meantime, I must tell this to Oświęcim, when it became the Auschwitz of the concentration camp. Was evacuated from the Jews. They asked all the Jews to leave the town. So this was, let's say, in those times, it was about an hour's trip from my town, Sosnowiec, where we lived. So all our relatives came first. Usually, the way they did it, they kept the people under transit, some sort of transition transition point, they called it. So of course, they were all coming to us, and we had a decent apartment, but not for so many people. My paternal grandparents, my aunts and uncles with children, 1, 2, how many, 3, 4 families. I don't want to take time. I could start thinking how many there were, and they all came to live with us. It was very difficult because our means were limited, and my mother was very good-hearted, and we all wanted to help, but it was extremely difficult, and my mother was just almost, sometimes she talked to her nonsense. Because she was so good, and she couldn't do it. And so, but then, after a certain time, they threw us out anywhere. So everyone found some sort of a place. Every family had to go separately. And unfortunately, my grandfather, the Talmud Chacham, the independent Talmud Chacham, means the learned in Talmud, who was mentioned, called as in that book about Oshvinchim as a Rav Posner, which means the master of, had to go with his wife, with my grand, to a Jewish old age home. But unfortunately, they didn't stay long there, because then came, and the other aunts and uncles came, found some places to live. And we were, my mother had friends, and all with the religious and poor and not and rich and the secular. So she, with some woman that she bought a herring from, my mother used to love her spicy food. She thought of my mother, that my mother was her kind, because with everyone my mother was just like them. I mean, so she invited us to stay with them, and this was a very sort of I hate to say it, but it's sort of a common family, and I cried there all the time, and they resented it, because it was, and we just occupied a part of their kitchen, and so it was very difficult. And so finally we asked and begged, and there was some sort of a Jewish office, that the people who sort of administered it for the German, and some of them thought they were doing good, and they were all making some sort of a living with that, and I'm sure they were decent people among them. So, but anyway, they found us a place in a big building that was a very dark, small room, but we wanted it just be for ourselves. And this was the place where, this building was the place where in August of 1942, this was a terrible day in the history of the Jewish community. They called it some sort of a gathering, and they announced that all the Jewish people have to gather at a certain point, and I don't know anymore, it's a big, let's say like a stadium-size area, at a certain time. And this, when we came, we sat together for a long time, so they didn't separate us right away. But we sat through the night, and in the meantime we colored my mother's hair. She should look young. She was looking for work. She was only 40, maybe 42 or something, but she aged with the time. She lost a lot of weight. All the aunts that were overweight lost weight. And anyway, she thought she would look for work, and we colored my mother, who never wore a lipstick. She was very modest. We colored her hair, and we sat all night in that gathering, that spot, with the whole family around us, the grandparents, humiliated, and packages, and the rain was falling, and the color of my mother's face was, from her hair, it was cheap hair color. No one knew how to do it, and it probably wasn't, nothing good was it. No one looked for quality. We just wanted her to look young, because she was just starting getting gray. So that paint, the hair color was falling on her face, and we all night in that rain, and the next, with the grandparents, so humiliated. And the next day they, maybe after a long time, it was day already, maybe even another day, they separated us. And one go this way, and we were passing through some this, and my mother and my youngest sister went one way, and the grandparents and aunts and uncles and children. And
they went where?
One way, And we went the other way. This was the first separation. Then they took these, so we went free, the kids. So they took the people, the older people, to what again they called a transition point. It was a big building in the same city, and happened to be the same building where we were living. That was our last abode. I can't call it an apartment, it was a miserable dark room. So from there, we tried to, so my aunt was there with her little, maybe 3-4-year-old girl, and my mother and my sister, and I think the real old people they took right away, because I don't remember anything about my grandmother and grandfather being there at that, again, transition point. But a very terrible thing, a memory that I have, I must mention too, that when they separated my grandmother and grandfather from us, my grandfather says in Yiddish, "Don't worry, children, God will not abandon us." That's very bad. So so my mother and my little sister and my aunt with the 3-4-year-old girl were in the transition point. And it was, this was always Jews, they never gave up, tried to save themselves again. So there were Jewish people involved in guarding that place, and my youngest, the husband of my youngest aunt, my dad's sister's husband, happened to do fairly well on the black market, making a living. So he offered to pay everything he has to get my mother and my aunt out, with the children, of course, out of that transition point. And my mother, my aunt they had to separate, one person at a time. And my aunt had the courage to separate from that little 3-year-old or 4-year-old. I really want to be accurate, and I don't, at the moment, I'm not sure if she was 3 or 4. Tsusha was her name. So she had the courage. She went out first, and they hid the little toddler in some sort of a cabinet. For hours, that baby didn't give a peep. And the man who helped out was able to get her out at an appropriate time, and supposedly they were saved. Well, my mother and my sister didn't want to separate. So they wrote, my mother smuggled out a letter, and the man said he can't get them, the two of them together out. So my mother smuggled out a letter, "Don't worry, we will be working." And she went back to this room that we had there. I found myself a pair of warm underwear. I don't know why it was August, but she was whatever, and we will be all right, and don't worry, and this is the last we heard of them. And they were, so then came the day when they marched the people to the trains. And I went to, and it was on a street where Jews were not allowed to, but there was one building where you could see, it had a gate to this street where they were marching, and on the other side where I had access to, I wasn't supposed to be there, but I could get there somehow. And with the Polish people, I stood there and watched masses and masses of people going and going, and I was looking for my mother and my sister. And I'm not sure where, for a long time I didn't see them. I couldn't see so well. It was a certain distance. And finally, I saw them with some, I saw they had some sort of a hell or whatever. That's how it looked to me. And at that point, I felt very guilty that I should have volunteered and go with them. But I didn't. So I went back to the apartment of my aunt, because we were already, and I stood on the stairs, and there is a window and some, I don't know how to describe it now, near the stairs, and I put my head on that window, and I didn't want to go back for hours and hours and hours. They called me, and finally life took over, and
we continued on. So then we were, after that, shortly after that, we were sent to the ghetto, which was called Srodula. And from there, I was with my sister and my brother. Well, my sister, we had to walk from that ghetto to the factory where we worked, and I did the least amount of work that I could. I sabotaged, whatever, I used too big a word, but I didn't do, and then I think of it, and even then I thought maybe it wasn't fair because the Jews are expected a certain output, but somehow all I did is sew buttons, so anyway, and also suddenly I realized that they were making raids from those factors and taking the factors which were supposed to protect people from camps. They were using them for raids, and people were still going to work. So because they were afraid, they didn't know what to do. But I did my own thing. So, after my sister and my cousin were taken at a raid like that to a camp, at that time it was still a work camp, I think. So I decided I'm not going. It was cold. I mean, it wasn't really winter, but it was cold, and I didn't have any shoes, and I think it was very difficult to go. My feet hurt. I acquired some sort of bone disease, whatever. So I didn't go, and when there was one raid where I wasn't there, so they took my sister and my cousin, and so I was safe for just a little. Everyone was only safe for a little while. So then I went to so then they sent me a notice. I have to appear. I knew what I had to appear for. So there was a place. I'm just telling all this to see how people were just fighting the best way they knew how. So there was a factory in the city where Jewish people were working, and a small factory, I think, a Jewish family was managing it too. And so I found out about this from some friends, and so when I got the notice to appear, I went into hiding. So so by day this was a factor, and we were hidden somewhere, and the managers had also a young son, maybe hid with us, yes, probably, and then just a few people, and we stayed there for some time and came out. Who fed us? Probably the Jewish people, because I don't remember being extremely hungry, and we came out at night and ate and had a little. I don't know how we hid. By day we just hid somewhere there. And this went on for a while until they took my brother as a host for me because I didn't appear. So when I learned about that, I went back to the ghetto and delivered myself. So they did free my brother. And this was the Jewish
They freed your brother.
They did free
when you went.
When I came, delivered myself because I knew why they took him. It wasn't clear that they did, because he appeared in some basement window where they kept the prisoners. He appeared and showed me that he was free, and this is the last I saw of him. And he stayed in, apparently, as far as I know, he stayed in Sosnowiec until 1943, when they took all the people directly to Auschwitz, I think. And so that was his fate. And I was taken to Sudeten. It was called Sudeten. That's the part that was the disputed part between Czechoslovakia and Poland, which had
all kinds of work camps. At the time, they were work camps. So that was a spinning factor. They spinned yarn for textile work from raw material. It's called raw material. I described it in all kinds of languages before, in all kinds of situations. So this was very heavy labor. I came a year after the other inmates were in already, so I looked a little fresher, and I had rosy cheeks for a long time. And they called me die Starke, the Germans. I'm the strong ones. So they gave me the worst kind of work, and I just couldn't see how I will do it. Night work at a machine that was sorting out, or not sorting, tearing apart the flax that was I think they did it mostly with flax, which linen is made from. And I could see I will not sew. And also the girl next to that did it, that was very good at it, was not my kind. I just couldn't communicate with her. And I was older too. And I called my mother's device. She decided that to keep me, during when we were together, to keep me from getting taken away, she found some doctor that had I can't forget his eyes, very warm Jewish eyes, and he supposedly was Gentile. Maybe it was a Jew in disguise, maybe it was one decent Gentile. And he gave me, she said, they decided I had shortness of breath attack, some shortness of breath attack, Atem not Anfälle. So I recalled that, and I simulated, how I did that, I don't know, that I had some sort of attacks, and I couldn't do that work at night, and I couldn't do this, but the machine I knew the machine will finish me. The girls talked about it, that it was a very dangerous machine. They didn't worry about worker safety. So they transferred me to another day job, there was a big pile of raw, very heavy stuff, and we were by hand, we had to make it, pull it and make it softer, and when he turns his head, I didn't do it. And the same thing, that's what I did all the time. And he hit the girls now and then, but I don't think, if I'm not, that maybe he was close to me. He never hit me because this was such a cruel and stupid man. And he had some, shall I continue?
Well, we've reached the end of the tape right now, so we're going to take a short break. And you just keep that thought, and we'll continue it on the second tape.
Oh, you want to continue?
We're just going to take a short break now.
All right.
Okay.
With the raw material that came, I think those were big bales of plant material that they put girls in front of them, and we were just some sort of motion, pick out and soften, separate the pieces, and throw it on the other mount, and he kept coming, and there wasn't much done, because we were fed poorly, we didn't have any strength, and I just didn't want to work for the Germans. And I always feel some remorse about it, because they demanded an output, a work output, and it reflected badly on the whole group. But the others didn't work so hard either, maybe, at least in my group. And he, as I mentioned, that he sometimes hit us, and he had a little bit, some sort of respect for me, because I was his translator in French. And I knew very little French, but with languages I always had a lot of chutzpah.
So, and I had a certain facility. So I considered myself, I said that when the French prisoners came, I said that I knew French, and I knew a little bit. And I did communicate and translate for him, but I didn't know all the idioms. And this was such a stupid, crude man that he sort of was a little bit afraid of me or something. And I don't think he ever hit me, but he was very close to it. So this is the way it went. I think this is the way, the work I did there, and this was in May. I came there in May 1943, as I said, when the others were already there for 1 year. And I had to, we were very hungry and treated badly and marched very early. We had very little sleep because they had all kinds of, they called appel. They called us all out and counted us and whatever, on and off. And the sanitary conditions were bad and the food was very scarce. And we tried to, everyone tried to bribe the people in the kitchen to get a little more. And I was so hungry, and I was with a group of girls who were had some standard, and they always looked down on they were also religious also, and I was considered the unreligious one in that group, and some of them were also from that Oświęcim, from that city, and they knew my family. So anyway, they looked down on the people who ate up everything and didn't have anything. Those were the common ones, you know. They somehow were able to control it and divide it, not completely perfectly, but so I felt very guilty when they were expressing their disdain, and I did leave myself a little bit, but I was so hungry, I just ate most of what I got, and just a little bit, not so they should see that I had something, that I wasn't like the others completely without restraint. But I also, everyone, as far as I knew, I saw, they tried to bribe whatever they had. We had some of our personal belongings in the beginning. So they tried to give them, and I had some things too, and I did the same things. Sometimes I got a potato. That was the big deal that helped to lighten the hunger. And at the same time, we were at transition camp. Again, the transition, they always had those points where they left the prisoners going from one place to the other, and some terrible things were going on because they locked up the people in a very small place without food and water, and we heard the screams. And we had tried to help, and we didn't have anything ourselves. But there was among our group, this small group that I associated with, there was another, also a small group of two already young women. One of them married from a rabbinic family from Chshan of one of the Halberstams. I want to mention the name, and they felt a tremendous responsibility. And those crude people on top there in the kitchen, they had some respect for quality of a person. That's all. And somehow they managed to get a little bits of food out of them, and we went under the door there and heard the moans and the things and tried to stuff it in. So this is one of my bad memories, terrible memories, because the moans were just terrible. But also one of my beloved cousins on my mother's side, who really believed in me, she was just a few years younger, and at those times this made a difference. And also they came from Germany and my parents helped them out a lot, because they came when Germany threw the Polish Jews out. So she loved me so much, and she had been in a camp already. I don't know how they took her so young and kept her in a camp. So she was going through our camp. Hesse Ernst was her name, and she didn't, I didn't know about it. And the next day, one of those people in charge there told me that she was there. I sort of suspected that she may be there, so maybe I asked about it.
And I was told that she knew that I was there, but she told absolutely them not to tell me because she thought she was going to Auschwitz, and I shouldn't. She didn't want to break my heart. So that woman, she told me afterwards that she was there. And so if I may, I would like to tell the fate of this cousin, Hesse Ernst. She was so brave. She saved herself in Auschwitz by hiding somewhere. She was already pointed out for destruction, and I think it was in something like in an oven. I don't know what kind of, she couldn't be in the crematorium. She saved herself by hiding somewhere in a very unlikely place, and managed to get to, then they took them to Bergen-Belsen, which was way up north of Germany. This was a long trip. And she survived until the end of the war, but died after the end of the war. This was extremely tragic and extremely, it's one of my terrible memories. And so that was my, yes?
How did you live? Where did you live when you were working in these camps?
We were
were you living in the camps? I mean, were you sleeping?
Yes. I think it was some military barracks or something. We were in like bunk barracks up and down. I don't know how many, probably three rows.
Did the guards ever come in and abuse any of the girls or rape them
not
or anything
sexually,
like that?
No. Well, not that. There were women guards mostly, and they shaved if someone. They shaved the girls' heads. Not one committed a crime getting out of the line or something, and they hit whenever they felt like it, and and of course they just. In some departments where it couldn't be avoided at the factory, they just abused the girls. There was one department where they spinned already the thread, made it ready for textile work. So there were tremendous machines, twice or three times the width of this room, tremendous machines that they used those girls because they thought that they would be fast, and they had to move very fast to serve this machine. I never was good in things like that, but I know that it was extremely hard work, and the women, they were supposed to be helpers to those women who were trained workers. Excuse me.
Would you like some water?
Maybe this would help. Excuse me. So the trained workers used those girls to do all their work, and they just were emaciated. And once in a while they did, and they were supposed to be sort of some of them were sort of the Czech population, but this was the nature of the beast, this whole system. So sometimes they did throw them a piece of, I call it throw them. Maybe they did throw it, maybe they gave it to them. I couldn't say for sure, a piece of bread or something. But they took tremendous advantage of those girls and made them work, indescribably hard. But they were supervised all the time because the women who were supposed to do the work made them work. But whenever no one looked, we just didn't do it. And so the pile there that was supposed to be wasn't. So I don't know. Sometimes we were hit. Some of them asked because we couldn't do it, we wouldn't do it, we just didn't do it. And of course the conditions were getting worse. The food was getting less and worse. And then, excuse me, came the time, I don't know if this will heal, so I just will continue speaking like that, if it's all right.
That's fine.
So then came the time when we were converted into a concentration camp. So the big Obersturmenführer, whatever his title was, the SS men came in the uniform, more than one, and we had to undress completely naked, and they
looked at each one of us, how perfect we were. And we passed the whole thing, and they hang us. They didn't tattoo us with a number, but they hang a number on our neck, and we were a concentration camp. And things, I don't remember all the details of how administratively, how this affected us, and it's not so important, but the food was worse, and the threat of Auschwitz was there. In fact, one of the older girls was taken away and sent somewhere, and the rumors were that she was sent to Auschwitz because she was. There were also French workers, and then there were French officers, and she had some sort of friendships with them. I don't know how she talked to them because she didn't know French, but for this supposedly, maybe she flirted with them. All right, there were things, and all these things like that happened too. So, excuse me. So she.
Would you like to take some more water?
Thank you. And another girl died under mysterious circumstances. A very lovely girl, and she did so well and kept her spirits up and looked well, and suddenly one day she died, and I don't think that we knew why and very, very young. I don't know how old she could have been.
So how long were you there in that camp?
2 years.
2 years, and then how were you liberated?
By the Russians. This was also very momentous. Anyway, so it was getting to the point that we were basically very hungry, and we knew the news of the war, and some of them were rumors, and some we thought were rumors that weren't. It was because this all came through some sort of clandestine channels, and when the war ended, we didn't know. We knew when Roosevelt died, and we knew when Hitler committed suicide, but we thought this was a rumor. We couldn't believe that. And, excuse me, and we didn't learn about the end of the war until May 9th, while the end of the war was May 7th. So there were rumors, but we were told not to leave the camp because there were shootings going on, and people were in the last minute, people were losing their lives, and so we didn't leave until we were sure that some people did go out to see.
You mean the guards still stayed in the camp
with you? No, the guards didn't stay, but word of mouth, there were some friendly people maybe in the general community surrounding us that told us. The guards left, and we were told that they are going to. He intended the SS commander intended to blow up the whole camp. And by why we still didn't leave, because people told us from one side they were telling us that he was going to blow it up. On the other hand, we were told that there was shooting going on, and some people did get killed. So, well, whatever it is, we stayed, and finally on May 9th, the Russian came in, and we ventured out.
How did you hear these rumors, though? How did you get the information? Who gave it to you?
I think I can't say that there was. We helped each other out a lot. Some people write books about how brutalized and how everyone was out for himself. Well, partly we were out for one, and we wanted to survive, and we were hungry, and we tried to, but we helped each other a lot. And this brings me to the point, if I may still say something about the camp, that at the much later after came when it was already a concentration camp, and let's say half a year before the end of the war, or maybe more, came the Hungarian Jews, and they were fresh from
directly from supposedly normal life, not from any camp, and they were very they had difficulties adjusting because they weren't put through the successive stages that the Polish Jews were put through all those years. So they came and from they had great difficulties. So we helped them out by, it was called, they didn't have any stockings, so we did it too for ourselves too. So we stole the spools of yarn from the spinner that were spinned in the factory, and we brought them to the camp, and I did it too, and we hoped that they will not search us. Sometimes they searched us, but they never searched. I didn't, and they gave it to them and taught them. I don't know how I did it. I did it for myself too, to some sort of crude stockings, because there was nothing. So this is how, one of the ways how we helped each other out. And by the way, those Hungarian girls had their heads shaven because they couldn't, the hunger was so overwhelming that they got, when they marched us to the factory and back, they got out and grabbed the grass to eat it. So they got hit by the female supervisors, whatever, guards, and their heads were shaven off.
So when they came in, did they bring news then from the outside? Is that kind of how you got the information?
I don't think so. I think the information we got is that from people who tried to find out from the people, the indigenous population that worked in the factories, because they worked, maybe they were our supervisors, or some of them you could talk to. They supposedly they were friendly, they took advantage. Some of them probably were, and many of them took advantage. Yeah. So this is how the end of the war was approaching, and the Russians came in, and we wrote...
the Russians were the ones who liberated you?
Yes, and at that time I didn't know a word of Russian, but I wrote with one of them, I must say, on his knee, because he said there was no room no space on a tank into the town, and with the other prisoners, and
so where did you go when you were liberated? Where did you go?
Okay, and in the we stayed in that building for a few days at least. In the meantime, I think it was the male prisoners that were in the area, because there were factories. This was a beautiful area in the mountains, but they had factories there in Sudan and those areas, maybe for a good commercial reason that wasn't important to me. I never tried to find out. But so the other male prisoners must have opened and grabbed some stuff. So the girls were hungry, and we went in and took food, and they started set up housekeeping. Some of them were very good at it and cooked, and we were extremely hungry. And I did take two. I took a pair. I said, I'm not going to start my life that way. I did take what everyone else cooked up. I ate it, I must say. But I took a pair of slippers because I didn't have anything to walk in. So this is what I went out into the world with. And then the Czech, that was Czechoslovakia now, because they took it, just took it back temporarily, whatever. They had a Czech, so okay, let's say the local government, they set up some sort of government, and they thought they would get some diseases, because we stayed in that same building that had very poor sanitary facilities, and they cooked and baked, and there were flies, insects flying, who knows, and so they tried to liquidate this whole camp, and they sent most of the people home, but I felt very weak. In fact, my friends told me, they never told me that after the war, that they were just appalled how skinny I was, that they were scared
look at me. Because I thought maybe I wasn't worse than the others, but because they remember me how I came in, that I looked so rosy. So anyway, they...
Where did you go then?
So I said, I'm not in a condition to go home. So they put a few people up in small hotels, this was some sort of hotels, and they didn't care about how we will eat, but they gave us a place to stay. And I just went out and did some bartering. I was sort of kept together with two distant relatives that I don't know what happened to them. I'm sorry. They were much older than I was, two women, and we sort of cooperated. I did this, and I didn't know how to cook or anything, so they cooked what I brought in, and they said, they marveled, they said I probably gained a kilo a day. This is how, and this is why and after war pictures, some of the people, including me and my sister, were very puffed up, because suddenly this was after years of starving.
How did you get to America then?
So then I went back to Poland because I had to look for my family also. I already, in the meantime, since I mentioned that this was a transition camp, some people that were going through, we had an opportunity to talk to. So I already knew that my mother and sister perished, what happened to the people of our city at those periods of time. But I didn't want to believe it, and I thought maybe someone else will survive, and I still hoped that I still thought that my sister was in what was the work camp that she was. In the meantime, she already was in Bergen-Belsen, because they took them to Bergen-Belsen, and she survived in terrible conditions. She lay with bodies, she woke up with dead friends dead, and she didn't know if she will wake up. And she was taking care of my cousin, the one and they were sick with typhus, whatever, and like that. So anyway, I went to Poland to look for family, and wound up in a city where one of my uncles lived, all the same area. It was called Bielsko or Bilic, that had a textile, very fine textile, the better kind. Lodz was the real textile center of Poland, and owned by many, many Jews. It was a Jewish city, one of the largest cities in Poland. And Bilic also produced fine textiles. So I couldn't do anything, and everyone supported oneself by black marketing, but I couldn't do anything like that. So I found myself a job in the office there, and was there for a few months. And then my sister found out that I was alive, and one day I was looking out. I had some friends, two young men who were employed by the equivalent of KGB, and they found me the job. And also one found me an apartment that was taken for someone who declared himself German during the war, or something, a very modest apartment not far from that factory. And one day, and there was a streetcar going by. So one day on a Sunday, I was just getting ready to meet a friend, and we were going to Wadowice. You know, Wadowice is the town that the Pope comes from, and I had an aunt and some friends. So she was coming from there, and maybe I was going with her there or something, getting dressed, and I look out. I thought maybe she will come in the streetcar, and there was a girl that I thought, oh, that could be my sister, and I always looked for, and sure enough it was. So I see she's going down. It was just, the stop was right there, and she walks in, and it was my sister. Of course, she looked different, and she found out where I was, because people were going. She went through all of Germany, and also a suit made from a blanket, and was telling me her story, and I just spent all day. I couldn't get dressed. I just kept crying and crying. So so she told me that she and my cousin were together,
and they found my uncle in Copenhagen, who he lived in, that was my dad's brother, who lived in Germany, and had my aunt, who was also a cousin of my parents and of her husband, had a brother in Copenhagen. And he brought, so my uncle was first in Dachau, she got him out, and he brought, so to get him, and so he went first to Copenhagen. This is how it was connected with getting him out from Dachau, probably. Somehow they managed it. And so that may have been in 39 or something, in the last minute. And then in the last minute they managed to get her out. And so they survived. And this was one brother of my dad who survived in Copenhagen. And my mother's brother, who also lived in Germany in a different town, he got to the United States, to Detroit, through an aunt of his, my grand aunt, and then to get his wife and 3 children who are my cousins living in that area, to this day in that area. And,
is that how you got to America?
Yes. So my uncle wanted. So anyway, so first I have to make it. I don't have so much time anymore. Shall I make the little?
Yeah. Tell us how you came to America.
So I lived in Sweden. So anyway, the uncle from Copenhagen wanted to take us to, all 3 of us, my cousin too, but my sister didn't. He had a man from the Jewish Brigade. I have to mention the Jewish Brigade because they did a lot after the war. So that means Jews living in Palestine who volunteered or whatever, requested to be under the British, in the British military, and they helped out after the war. So a man came that he was going to take my sister, came to Bergen-Belsen to take my sister and my cousin to Brussels, because that's where a brother of my aunt lived who was connected with Joint and also was a Chazan. He was Paul Enoch, a very gifted man who, anyway, so, but my sister said, I can't go without Magia. That's what they call me in Polish. And so I will tell you, the effort of our uncle shouldn't be in vain. You go with this, you go to Brussels, and we'll come. I will go and get Magia, and we come back. We'll go together. So she came, and she came to get me. But by the time we had to smuggle, it took months to get from Poland to up there to Bergen. We had to go back to Bergen-Belsen because this was a displaced persons camp, and from there, from Poland, you couldn't go anywhere. In fact, I wasn't allowed to tell the people I worked for, the Polish, people that I was going to Germany because I had to smuggle myself. I just said that I was going to Warsaw with some relatives because those boys told me that helped me to get the job, that they could never get anyone in there anymore. So I'm just telling these things to see that people were helping each other. Jewish people.
Well, when you came to America, though, when you finally got here, you came from Sweden.
Yes, because my uncle from Detroit, he wanted finally the papers. He tried to make out an affidavit to get. He wanted both of us, and so my sister was already engaged, so I felt very guilty because I was, together with everyone there, I was active in some sort of Zionist organizations, but I thought, I want to see the world. I can always go from America to Israel, but I'm from Palestine. That was Israel already. From Israel, it will be much more difficult to go anywhere because I knew life. They were the shlichim, the emissaries that came from Israel, always told us that life is very difficult. They didn't in Israel. And I thought, anyway, I want to see the world. And my dad I remember that Dad wrote to my mom to get us, the 2 oldest children, to America. So I thought, and I didn't know what was waiting for me because it was very difficult in the beginning. So I came to Detroit.
Tell us about some of these pictures now.
This is my mother, Sprinza Posner. Her official name was Sabina, but anyway, Sprinza, that was her name. And this is my father, Yonah Chaim Posner. And this is at the time probably when they were engaged, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. And who are these people?
This is my great-grandfather, the rabbi of Yavozhno. His name was Vovek Rosenblum. And this is my grandmother, his daughter, and Gittel Ernst. Ernst was my mother's maiden name. And this is my grandfather, my mother's father, who was a shochet and a rabbi in Rapka, a resort in the Carpathian Mountains. And this is my mother and I when I was, I think, 2 years old, and my brother who was about 4 years old.
Okay. And who were these people?
This is a family picture of my, this and Sarka's wedding. It wasn't at the wedding. After, I think it was after the wedding, because I think she already wears a wig. She was really very pretty, and we just adored her.
And your mother and father were in there?
And this is her, yes, and this is her, the bridegroom. And this is my mother and my father. And this is my sister who survived. And my uncle Srulek, who had such a tragic fate that I mentioned before. And this is my brother, my oldest brother. And this is my grandfather, Rav Shlomo Posner. And those are some of the lovely children that were killed.
Is there anything else that you would like to tell us that you would like to add to your story?
How much time do I have? 2 minutes?
You have about 5 minutes.
I would like to mention the anti-Semitism of the Poles and the fact that they were very anti-Semitic, but so are many, many non-Jews, and some of them control it and some of them don't. And I would like to emphasize that the Jews lived in Poland for many centuries and developed a rich culture, and it shouldn't be forgotten. And also the emphasis on Polish anti-Semitism takes the guilt away from, takes some of the guilt away from the Germans, and it makes people forget that they were the perpetrators of the genocide, and no one else but the German could try to do such a bestial thing to annihilate a whole community of people who were contributing so much to humanity. And I also want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my story.
Well, it was some story. This concludes the recording of artifacts, and I want to thank you for telling us your story. And this concludes the tape.
Thank you.